everyone, this is Olga Yarshevsky. I run content strategy for Next Change Group and for MetaWeek, and we're all super excited about the conference that we will host in March from 7th to 10th in Dubai. And I'm here today with our amazing speakers, Next Changes and Blockchain Week's longtime friends and partners. Please give it up for Susan O, Chief Marketing Officer at Garden Bark and Hungry Animals. Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for tuning in. Wes Levitt from Theta Labs. Hey, Wes, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having us.
Nitin Gaur from IBM Research. Hi, Nitin.
Hey, Olga, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Good to have you as usual. So, and Meiko Matsumura, last but not least, general partner at Gumi Cryptos Capital, and the man with the best video and mic set at all video conversations that we have.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to our Roadshow, and we're here today to discuss immediate trends for media, tech, investment, and finance of Metaverse, of bridging digital and physical worlds. So I will start with a question for everyone. So what is Metaverse for you? And do you see two worlds actually intertwining? And will it happen sooner, or will still at the very, very early stages?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in if you don't mind. I think the broadest framing that I appreciate the most is the idea that the metaverse really becomes the value of the digital over the physical, right? So the idea of meta is really the idea of something that's above, right? And so the idea becomes that there is a digital and symbolic world that really captures value, right? And I think the thing that I think makes blockchain kind of inseparable from this is that blockchain becomes the kind of digitally immutable record of the ownership, right? And of the rights associated with the value, right? So I think that's how these two kind of technology ideas kind of become converged. To me, broadly, I think, Metaverse has quite a lot of people huddling underneath it for safety. So I think it's become a little junky. So, I tend to kind of think about it more from a transmedia perspective than I do from a VR perspective. But, I do think it's really hard to value something without a mechanism of ownership and a mechanism of kind of ledger, right? So I think to me, the idea that we're valuing the digital over the physical is really the underpinning becomes blockchain, especially when you use the phrase open metaverse. So I think that's my take, and I'm happy to have people jump in.
Yeah, I also think it's very interesting hearing the varying definitions people are using for everything from all-encompassing digital world that you would spend literally all your time in to a lot of people making, I think, a compelling case that you already are have one foot in the metaverse just with how connected you are today through social media or through the internet in general. It's definitely going to be even more so. Everyone's going to have a new definition for it now that it's the hottest way to raise money is to put metaverse in your deck, and now you can get someone to throw some money at it. So anything is going to be labeled metaverse at this point. But I think the key for me is basically it's some way of creating a digital analog to something that is in the real world. So it can be, not a one-size-fits-all thing. In some cases, it might be a video game or an online world where it is totally representative of the world. In some cases, it might just be one small aspect of it. But it's just this concept of something that can either augment or even replace the analog version of something in your life with something in the digital form, ownership, content, and so on.
And for me, I think I have an expanded view of what Meiko described, and I've been in the space for quite some time and looking at just not the convergence of physical and virtual and the ability for us to transact seamlessly between those two worlds. I also view sort of metaverse as the meta of the digital ecosystem that we are creating. So ability for, let's say, what we do in gaming world and being able to move liquidity, let's say from a traditional sort of crypto world in the gaming world into NFT world. I think that still, to me, qualifies as metaverse because these are different ecosystem, different universes that have different value propositions and ability for us to be able to traverse between these different ecosystems and traverse the movement of value I think, and is something that I think shines out from defining what metaverse is. And I would also say this, that any conversation of metaverse is not complete without Web 3.0. To me, I see Web 3.0 as a defining infrastructure that allows us to build these infrastructures. And there's still a lot of gaps, as we'll discuss here, in what is that sort of framing of metaverse. But it's not just NFT. It's much bigger, I think. I'll stop it then to get Sophie's point of view.
Thank you, Susan.
I tend to think that. Okay, thanks, Olga. I think of it as a natural evolution of the internet, and what we term the metaverse and open spaces, a digital representation of different communities, is simply, sorry, that's my dog. It's a visual and binary representation of different communities and groups that are now able to transact and fully in a fully immersive experience. And so, like the internet brought people together in terms of a knowledge base, right? Now we're able to bring people and things together experientially. And so that is super exciting to me, but I don't think it's even, all that new. Like Versus.io, they're building the infrastructure for a metaverse. They've been building for 10 years, right? Decentraland has been around. It's one of the very first metaverse spaces. In gaming environments and AR and VR, they've all been different ways of approaching just different sides of the elephant, if you will, right? So it's just a natural evolution, I think, of our online experiences. But I do agree with Miko in a way that there's value to it now added, right? There's a transactional value that can be represented that's immutable. And as you have to kind of follow the money in a way to see like what's viable and what those chains are, what that throughput is, right? At the end of the day, all these virtual machines that we're talking about, it's all about inputs and outputs, right? Where does it spin around and where does it accumulate value? How do we find the F factor in a multi-sided marketplace where 1 + 1 becomes 1.1 or 1.2? And that's what the metaverse is able to deliver by connecting digital online experiences offline to what we say that we value, and that can be validated by action.
That's a good point. So these are like tentacles that really grow from one world to another, and they really do intertwine. And speaking of value, well, one of the buzzwords, and it's actually a new dictionary word now, is NFT. And along with gaming, NFTs are to remain the biggest metaverse trends in 2022. Well, now, Susan, back to you. I know that you've been in this space for a while. What do you see as an immediate NFT trend?
Well, it's like with anything else, that which has value, that which has utility has enduring value, right? So if you see NFTs as these really hot, pretty pricey pixels that, kind of represents a club that you want to belong to, that's awesome. They will pump and dump and repeat cycle endlessly. But NFTs are that sort of diaphanous, amorphous digital assets that are simply the most robust, flexible, and infinitely programmable. Think of it as a pretty skin that can hold anywhere of up to like 40 different protocols, each one that could actually represent a different dynamic pricing element, right? It's like the Russian doll of digital assets. And that's what I find really exciting about it. NFTs on everything are everything and can be anything, but just like with anything else, its utility. Can people use it? Does it demark a way that's efficient and transparent? Those NFTs will have enduring value.
Fair enough. Wes, I know that for Theta Labs, 2021 was a very exciting year, and I think you've been into NFT space a lot, right? So what do you think of immediate NFT trends?
Yeah.
What's the
So
NFT of
yeah,
tomorrow?
we had been started into the NFT space in 2020, but it was really in 2021 where we saw a whole lot of attention from every entertainment company we had spoken to. Creative Artist Agency was one of our early investors, and you know, they had dabbled a little bit, but didn't really take it seriously until it felt like overnight around, I believe it was late 2020, around the time when NBA Top Shot first started taking off, where all of a sudden it was like a switch had flipped, and all of their clients and everyone associated realized that there was something here, and they felt like they were behind the curve because they didn't have an NFT strategy. So I think then it was sort of a FOMO kicking in of not wanting to look like they're the only ones that don't have um, aren't embracing this in some way. And yeah, I think there's a couple different things. One is entertainment industry is always chasing new trends, new ways to reach users and to make them stickier and coming back to their content more often. But they're also looking for new ways to monetize constantly, because you know a lot of these companies are still built around revenue models that have been around for decades. And so when they see them move to digital, you know, they're starting to get more comfortable with it. Streaming has obviously made a good transition, but they're still wary of anytime their business model is being disrupted by something new and digitally native. It scares them. So I think they want to jump in front of it, and they've learned their lessons from being late in the past. So they'd rather jump in early, experiment, even if the initial ways don't work out, so that they can get in front of new technology coming out rather than be left behind again. So I think it's good for the space in general, even if a specific project and a new entertainment company launching NFTs or an artist doing it isn't always a success. It's moving the whole space forward as people experiment and try different things. Lets them move from their basic NFTs to like the type Susan's mentioning, where they have more utility or they unlock something within their existing entertainment structure. They're not going to jump right into that. You have to take these baby steps and find out what works and what doesn't, and that moves NFTs forward overall. So it's a good thing.
Increases the market volume too, I guess. Well,
yeah, that as well. Yeah.
Miko, what's your take on NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, to me, like one of the things that I think people are really misunderstanding is kind of like really the experience of VR and the experience of the metaverse and how they interact, right? Because I think people have this kind of idea of, oh, the metaverse is like related, you know, in a sort of a fundamental way to VR technology. And I think the problem with this idea, I think, is that every time a new medium has appeared, right, everyone has continued doing everything they've always done, right? So like, you know, when the iPhone appeared, did people stop reading books? Did they stop watching movies? Like, you know, no, like nothing, none of the previously existent media changed, you know, materially, right? And obviously a new media appeared, right? Which is sort of apps, right? So what I'm really proposing here, right, is that NFT provides, I think, an integration layer for what I tend to call transmedia, right? So, you know, I think VR is part of a broader transmedia agenda, right? But that the question becomes, what's the integration, right? So like, what's the integrity of transmedia, right? And I think, you know, ownership of digital assets like NFTs can be an integration point for interaction with like multiple different kinds of media, right? So you can go from environment to environment, and what stays common are your avatars, your equipment, your, you know, whatever it is that you have in the form of NFT, right? So that covers the use cases of access. You know, obviously there's sort of also this kind of art and collection of historical artifacts, but, you know, I think that's kind of just a different category.
Thank you. Well, again, bridging real life assets, right, and digital analogs. Nitin, do you have anything to add to our NFTization part? You're on mute.
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of time, again, with some of our traditional clients who are in this corporate space and figuring out NFT as a marketing engine, and there's a whole ecosystem evolving around it. And we went back to drawing board and looking into as what I call as 3 eyes of interest, you know, of this entire space. One is infrastructure, as to what secures NFT. I think there's a recent article that Moxie, which is a famed article, talked about if we aren't really focusing on secure infrastructure, then all the money and all the time that goes into acquiring these tokens, which, as Susan mentioned, seriously lacks some of the digital rights management and IP issues, then is it simply an image or a clip that you're paying for? And how do you keep it secure? How do you sort of assert your rights towards it? What's the protection regime that's behind it? So what we have done is we've classified this entire space, and for the sake of simplicity and the sake of getting your arms around it, into three I's. What is the infrastructure needed, which is largely a Web3 conversation, is looking into decentralized storage, decentralized compute, interconnect, ability for us to secure and keep this sort of information safe, and tie that to the walleting structure. The second I is instrument. A token is a token is a token. So how do we sort of have the safeguarding of a token, whether it represents a real estate as an NFT or an art or a music form or any of the things that Susan was talking about, from what it defines, what is the digital representation and what really gives it a value. And the third I is insights, which is applying AI and machine learning to look into the viability of these tokens and looking into as to what is the linkages of these different, and tying them to the underlying infrastructure. For example, if you're procuring something in a flow network from an Ethereum ecosystem and exchanging your Bitcoin for it, what is the linkages of those three different sort of ecosystems that connect them together? So having said all of this stuff, my job is kind of interesting and complicated at the same time, as I have to translate all this to corporate clients, the likes of the large institutions, looking at this as a marketing point of view, but also looking into regulators, because there's a whole element of regulatory aspect around, is NFT a property? Is NFT has intellectual rights, and how do we treat something of value? Do we tax it? And so I view it upon ourselves to clarify these things and being the voice of the industry and helping them understand that it's too early to regulate anything before we understand the space. And things like classification, I have classification of layers and players. Who are the layers? And the distributors, the publishers, the content creators, what is their role in this ecosystem? And that is the first step. And so we're in that space and figuring out the end-to-end model, which when you get an NFT as a token, ensuring that you have the right infrastructure that keeps it secure, that ascertains your ownership towards it. And I haven't gone yet, Miko, to the VR AR stage yet, though I think there's a massive play there, because that's a digital rights agenda that we look at.
I have a friend who was just like today, he was asking, hey, do you know an entertainment place that's looking for an NFT ticketing solution that they want to white label? Because the 1155 semi-fungibles are perfect for couponing and ticketing. The IP can belong, right? The 721s is non-fungible, but the 1155s can be a subset underneath them, which is perfect for merchandising, coupons, and vouchers. And what it does is, because it's encrypted and it's mutable, tied to an identity, you can't copy it, right?
Yeah, I've actually had a conversation with someone at one of the big ticket agencies, and they're still early. They're not, at least the person I spoke with, they were not making it sound like they're rolling out tomorrow, but there is a lot of excitement from some camps within them, because I think they may have found the solution to years and years of either counterfeit tickets, or you have such onerous restrictions on it that can't be counterfeit, but it's a shitty experience for the user, where you can't ever sell it to anyone, or if you change your plans, you have to forfeit the ticket. So something that's totally secure and it can't be duplicated, and it's there's only a set number exists, but it can also be transferred pretty easily to users. Actually, it's a pretty obvious use case for something that exists. It's not searching for a use case, it really has one. Now, there's only 2 or 3 big ticket, at least I'm speaking from US terms, there's only 2 really major ones, and so they're not moving fast, I don't think. But I think it's exciting that at least some of the people are fighting to use NFTs for that, because I think something like that, where it's you don't even have to know there's actually an NFT under your ticket. It's just being used for what it's bringing to the table, and not as speculation. That'd be good for NFT use cases across the board. I think it'd legitimize it to a lot of other corporate use cases, where they say you don't even have to say the word NFT to your user. In fact, you probably shouldn't, but you can still find a way to find them useful.
Now, I like that, Susan, that you mentioned games and avatars. Top 3 Metaverse tokens by market cap. You can all see that they're all gaming related. So in my understanding, from a very rich but particularly very specific industry, gaming seems to have figured out a product market fit, and now gaming slash metaverse projects are pouring into the market like never before. You just need to mention, like Wes just said, you just need to mention NFT or gaming slash metaverse, and this is like a magic word. So what shall we do to filter that fantastic amount of projects, and what's the like a particular investment strategy here? Miko, I guess here's to you.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing an incredible volume of kind of game related NFT projects. And I think to me, one of the things that is frustrating is that we have a medium that now conforms a limited digital immortality, right? And we're filling it with largely garbage. So, the thing that I think is really kind of unfortunate is that, like, the vast majority of NFTs in existence, will probably be worthless, so I think it's, the blockchain is doing a really, ace job of memorizing forever a lot of information that will probably end up being landfill, right? So, I mean, to me, like, that's a little unfortunate, but I would say that, like, there are aspirational, multi-generational, 4-quadrant trillion-dollar evergreen community-driven, transmedia franchises being born as we speak, and I think things like, Bored Apes, they're going to create their own video game, right? So, like, we're going to see the birth of kind of digital native, decentralized transmedia, and I think those will achieve sort of immortality, right? Because, when you think about the idea, it's evergreen because the community makes it so, right? That there's just constantly going to be people around it, making it more valuable.
I've struggled a lot with valuation of these things, right? I mean, it's at some level, we have all these metrics and all these models to value the fungible tokens, the ETHs and Bitcoins of the world, because now we have a momentum, we have trends, we have, all kinds of metrics that go into RSI, which defines the value. NFTs by definition are unique and they're one of a kind asset type. So oftentimes the valuation of that depends on multiple factors that are not understood to everybody else. There's interest level, there's a skill level that goes with it. But I think that one thing that NFT and gaming, this is to Wes's point, is one thing that does a fantastic job is participation. I think that my biggest complaint with a lot of crypto entities has been the fact that people are participating in crypto for simply going and buying tokens. And there are very few individuals or entities who are actually building the infrastructure and going and building innovative projects and participating in this. You see a different trend in the NFT space where you have a lot of creators. And the connection between creators and NFT holders is that messaging, is the subscription to say, I appreciate your art, or I want to be a part of this whole movement. You see a lot of participation in that gaming and NFT space. And you see a lot less of that in the traditional crypto space. And I think that to me is encouraging. Of course, to Miko's point, this has a long way to go. But that to me is like, it is forcing participation, which I think is a really, really vital part of what we're doing, with blockchain and crypto in general.
Thank you. Okay, now let's move out of NFTs. And however, I like the point about the bridge between creators and their audience. It's another step to the creators economy, I guess. So now we cannot mention the finance aspect, because decentralized finance is like a backbone, right, for metaverses. But the more virtual this reality is, the more gray the area of financial realm becomes, right? So Nitin, again, here's to you. What's your take on the convergence of tech and finance for future metaverse citizens? And how do we navigate this wild west, virtual west?
No, I think we spent the last 4.5 months, at least I, both in terms of understanding the space and developing some of the models, especially for AI understanding, because we are trying to figure out both in terms of financial crimes, because this space is moving so fast and is so vast that when something of value earlier is Bitcoin and ETH, and now financial crimes can move to any of these spaces or any of these verses. So we're looking into understanding the space. And I think that this convergence of the decentralized financing, blockchain, gamification, NFTs is a true sense of metaverse as we come to define it. You could potentially the ability for us to, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to take a liquid asset. And this is liquidity from Ethereum and Bitcoin by itself as a layer one protocols that have evolved over time and have certain recognized value. And ability to then translate through decentralized exchanges, which is a DeFi protocol, into a different asset class, which is needed, like say in case of Axie Infinity and SLP, you needed that translation from ETH to, let's say, Axies, and be able to then participate in that gaming ecosystem. And once you're done, ability to go and translate it back into ETH and eventually back into stable coins. That is just fascinating. And this is where the convergence of the various layers and various ecosystem come together. That while the stablecoin or the DeFi ecosystem is purely used on looking into financing and figuring out as to valuation risk, all the good stuff, layer one is providing the framework for processing transaction, giving you the token that actually has some value. And I think eventually you have gamification of these and NFTs, the ability for these tokens to be able to evolve in multiple ecosystems simultaneously and still hold value in other one in absence of the bridging protocols that we are yet to develop, I think is simply fascinating. And to me, that is the real metaverse. It's not just physical and virtual alone. I think it's amalgamation of these different universes that's evolving simultaneously. I'll stop at that. Love to get other perspectives.
You know that Aave released a product that allows you to actually borrow against your in real world assets and put it into crypto. And I mean, think about it that way, right? How many of us that actually hold assets are liquid, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to unlock the liquidity in hard-earned assets that we've put value into by stewarding it and guarding it, it's pretty amazing. That's like the holy grail, right, of personal financial sovereignty, in a way. It's like having your cake and eating it too. It's alchemy.
I broadly agree with all the positive sentiments here, but one thing I just want to warn you is it feels like a little bit there may be a trend toward the financialization of everything in the same way that, and this is a U.S. perspective. I think it's probably worse here than anywhere else, but it starts out in traditional finance where it was kind of a boring old industry where there wasn't a lot of money to be made. They just provided services like useful ones, like lending on your illiquid assets, and everyone needs a bank account. That's great. But then come the 80s, 90s, when everything was turned into a derivative, and I actually started off my career working in mortgage-backed securities. So, I've seen firsthand the chopping of into nonsensical ways of like, here's 80 different ways these 100 real estate transactions can be turned into 6 bonds and so on and so on. And I see a little bit of what feels like that when you see liquidity pools that are reinvested into mining farms, and then someone issues a token that represents the different profits of 8 different mining farms and all that. And I fear it may be going too far in that direction. I think it's totally great the use cases you guys are talking about, and you can't have any type of metaverse or any digital world without having the corresponding way to access your assets. I got to be able to transfer tokens to you guys. You have to be able to make a loan to me if I sell you something and so on. That's all great. Just remember that to focus on the ones where it's providing value to an end user and not just away from some financial firm or the crypto equivalent to just get more money out of folks.
You mean like a sophisticated pachinko machine or a mousetrap, right? Like that's why I don't touch synthetics. I mean, all those like BCC and ETRAF synthetics are like derivatives of derivatives. Like I'm not quite sure how it works. Yeah,
and I think some of it's done. I think some of it's done with good intentions, but it's basically the crypto equivalent of when you had a CDO squared, where like we collateralized these debt obligations, then we chop those up and then put them into different collateralized debt obligations, and it's basically like 2008 all over again.
Yeah, but I think it's not just so barring the lending and collateralization protocols and AMMs, the simple transaction between monetizing your NFTs, whether it's in form of royalties or whether it's in form of the fact that I'm selling my NFT, and 1511, for example, allows you to have a clause that every time asset or NFT an artist sold, I get a commission from that. That translates into a simple liquid crypto asset. that's still financialization, because at some point there's an exchange mechanism for the art that is in NFT form, and you need something in return, whatever that thing may be of value. Would you not classify that as financialization as well, barring the crypto lending and borrowing and everything else, just simply an exchange mechanism?
Yeah, no, yeah, and yeah, that's a good point. I guess that more accurately, I should have said we're against over financialization, because financial, which is subjective, but financialization of in and of itself is all crypto, really. That's not a knock on crypto itself. I guess just knock on. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it's a financialization for its own sake, not for the purpose of adding value to two users trying to transact or two businesses trying to transact.
I think one of the places where this battle is being fought very intensely, actually, is sort of Jack Dorsey versus Chris Dixon on crypto Twitter, right? Which is just to catch people up in the audience. You know, Jack Dorsey is hardcore Bitcoin, right? And Chris Dixon represents the Web3 movement, which is sort of hardcore crypto, right? And there's just it's turned into a hot war, right? They're shooting back and forth, right? And to me, the best way I would characterize this tension is that Jack Dorsey wants Bitcoin to be the reserve bank of the planet, right? So to countries like El Salvador, right? All this kind of thing, right? And the thing that frustrates him is that Chris Dixon wants crypto to be the reserve bank of the metaverse, right? And in a way, the thing that makes Jack angry is that every kind of dollar that's spent on kind of these sort of DeFi financial services, money spinners, kind of cross-chain whatever's going into these really weird places. You know, it just bothers Jack because it's sort of filled with scams, right? So in a sense, like, you know, his mission to save the world is basically being ruined by all of these like sideshow barkers and snake oil salesmen, right? So in a sense, like, you know, it's turned into a hot war on Twitter and they're kind of shooting each other, you know, but I think that in a way, there's kind of no better kind of emblem of this, you know. But I think, you know, Wes's point is really fundamental, right? Which is when you look at things like play to earn and the sustainability of token economies, right? You absolutely need to look at two things. One of them is, does the kind of reserve of the coin have sufficient, you know, is the reserve big enough that it can buy back tokens when it dips, right? Because if your reserve can buy the dip, you're a good economy. And if it can't, you're Turkey, Argentina, Venezuela, or you lost your peg, right? You lost your peg and your economy is now bad, right? So like, but the point is how does your treasury actually increase value? And that's the thing Wes was saying, which is that it actually increases value by providing value, right? So in a sense, like that's the final say, right? Which is that ultimately, if you don't provide value, you're going to lose your peg. Like there's no question, right? So the question becomes, how do you keep your peg? You know, add value to a user more than investor, right? So as long as the user value is greater than the investor value, you'll always be able to hang on to your peg unless you mismanage your network really badly.
Real quick, 20 seconds, two super hot trends for metaverse related reality 2022. Miko, you first.
Yeah, I think to me, this is a tremendous year, right? But I think the thing that's so funny about the hype curve on Metaverse is I think what's going to happen is that we're going to see the release probably first half of Cambria. So we'll see like a very high, expensive headset that produces ultra high quality VR experiences, right? And I think people will be really thrilled. So I think that, you know, we'll get a little pump off of that. Right. But then eventually people will probably get bored of that, you know, and so I think we'll probably see the downslope of that as well. Right. But I think by that time, I think, you know, people will get a much better understanding of gaming, a much better understanding of NFT, you know, so I think that VR will properly be put in its place this year, you know, as something nice, right. As a nice new thing we can all enjoy.
Okay. Thank you, Susan.
That connection between online, offline, in real world, and digital life will be much, much greatly cemented in a way for projects that are successful. So I've always I've always believed that AI's job was to help people be more human and be better humans. And we're seeing more of that, where the gamification incentivizes people to learn things, to look at their health, to look at their mental health, to acquire new skills, and to actually have a healthy sense of competition with themselves and others in a way that is relatively safe and somewhat anonymized. So that's going to become much, much more important. Again, back to the utility and the connection. Second is that, Miko, I'm not sure if it's VR, but I know definitely AR will, I think, have a greater sort of impact in the metaverse, because again, we're trying to meld our experiences from what we see in the real world to the digital realm. And what better way than through AR to see what we see on the screen as to see what we see on the building, right? And to be able to translate that in a digital, visual, and financial way.
Just to underline that, I think, I talked about Cambria, which is sort of the next Oculus high-end headset, but the one we're looking forward to is the Apple AR focused headset. So I want to underscore that, like Susan's alluding to unshipped gear, but it's gear that I think will get more excited about than VR. So I do underline that. I think AR will be a big deal, and I think Apple will probably lead the charge.
I hope not.
Thank you, Wes. How about you?
Yeah.
You look.
For two that come to mind first. The first one, you're already kind of seeing this, but every major brand, every company that's consumer facing is trying to figure out a way to do something metaverse related. They don't even understand what it is half the time, but they're all making these new forays into carving out space in digital worlds. So I'm sure some of them will be crap, but I think just because of so many different new experiments in the space, you'll see more and more cool cases emerging. And I guess the second related trend is because these are now totally mainstream brands jumping into this. And I think in a lot of cases, for the first time telling their millions of users what even a metaverse is, it might be the first time they even hear the word. You'll see a lot more mainstream folks be pulled into it this year, which is probably going to have all kinds of interesting consequences, going from a niche little crypto focus to mainstream people we brought in. But it probably can only be good to have more users drawn in and more diverse groups using metaverse outside of our little crypto tribe. So should be very interesting to see.
Thank you, Nitin.
Yeah, and I have just two predictions, which I've been doing this for 2 years now, is focus on infrastructure as we're building this newer age sort of rails that allows us to move these tokenized assets. We do need a much more resilient and robust infrastructure. And I think in many cases, many of the Web 3.0 projects are being built on Web 2.0. And I think especially in Metaverse, all the things that Wes mentioned is, we have more awareness, we have more people who want to participate in this ecosystem. So I think there'll be a lot of more investment and technologies going into building that Web 3.0 that has been happening for some time now. Second thing I predict is the gamification and win to earn. I think play to earn is great, but for having a much more sustainable economic model, for many of these things to have a longevity and success, they need to have a much more sustainable economic model. And I think, win to earn, which is going after gaming, gamify, is the trend that we will see in this year, I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Well, thank you, Nitin Gaur, Mika Matsumura, Wes Levitt, Susan O, Amolga Yershevsky. I'll see y'all in Dubai very soon in March 7th to 10th. We'll get to meet everybody in Dubai for MetaWeek. It's an offline meeting, a real world meeting with a virtual experience. So yeah, we'll get to bridge these two worlds and to try to find out the smaller bridges that help us intertwine the digital world and the real world. So thanks everyone. Make sure to go to metaweek.com to get your tickets, plan your trips, get to see all of our amazing speakers. And last but not least, happy Chinese New Year. Thanks everyone. See you very soon.
Thanks, Olga. Bye guys.
Thanks guys.
Happy New Year.